Yo, what's up, YouTube boxing community? First of all, I want to congratulate the Los Angeles Lakers on their fourth championship in 10 years, I believe it is, 4 or 5 championships. Wearing that Lakers shirt, the game was competitive as hell, man. It was a real good game. I mean, it's a classic, Boston and Lakers. It was a good game, and I was working because I'm actually a ESL teacher. I hope my bosses don't see this, but I work for a private school, so it's not like I can just say I'm gonna cancel the class and let's go. So I don't have those privileges since I work in a private school, but I actually canceled that. My students were actually taking a test, and there was 4 guys left, and these guys could not finish, and I said, man, dudes, just give me that test and I'll finish it for you. And I just took those tests and I went to my girl's house and watched the game there, eating some wings. And this video is not about the Lakers, 'cause I'm a real big basketball fan. I mean, it's the sport right under boxing for me, because boxing is #1 for me. I wanted to compare UFC and boxing. A lot of people say that UFC is swallowing boxing when they're just different sports. I mean, how are you gonna compare different fans, different people that watch these two different sports? I've actually came to like UFC. Back then, I was one of the guys that said, man, fuck UFC. It's a sorry sport. Nobody watches it. Only these white boys tatted up with piercings all over. But I actually watched the last 3 fights. I think it was. I remember watching Kimbo versus some other guy, and then the main event. I don't even remember who was the main event on that fight. And then after that, I watched Rampage and Rashard Lewis or Rashard something. And then I watched 2 weeks ago, I think it was, or the last week, Chuck Liddell versus some other dude. And these fights are pretty good. Of course, I'm not going to compare it to boxing, because in my opinion, boxing is way better than UFC. It's much more technical and with much more intelligence. You can beat a boxer with intelligence, and in UFC, you could beat somebody with power. Of course, you need some intelligence, some technique, but power pretty much beats it all. And I'm actually excited to watch Brock Lesnar fight. I think it's coming up next month. I'm not really sure when. But I watch these fights, but I'm a fan. But I'm not willing to pay pay-per-view to watch these fights. I just go to Wings and More and watch them for free. All I have to do is buy some wings and watch the fight. But I'm not willing to pay, what is it, like $44, $50 with tax? I wouldn't pay that. I don't know, it's just me, and I think there's way too many fights in UFC. Of course, I understand Dana White, I think is the owner. Of course, he wants to give more fights and make it more competitive towards boxing, but it just isn't, well, in my opinion. So I'm here to compare these two sports. I want to compare this to like football and soccer. So imagine football. Let's say American football and rugby, because rugby is much tougher, right? In a sense, it's harder, and it's pretty much like football. The only difference is you can kick the ball whenever you want. I think I don't really know. Rugby really doesn't have a lot of rules. Football does, or soccer, right? Because rugby pretty much is the combination of soccer and football. Football is much more disciplined. You can only use your legs. Football is much more disciplined, at least more disciplined than rugby. You can use your pretty much your hands. Every once in a while you can kick. In rugby you can just combine those and do it whenever you want. I don't see it as discipline. No rules. And I see the same thing with boxing and UFC. Boxing is much more disciplined. You can only use your hands, making it tougher for the fighter. And it's the same thing with like soccer and rugby. You're gonna make it tougher. Only use your legs. And in UFC, you just use whatever you want. So there's a similarity of rugby and UFC. In my comparison, that's what I'm trying to do. So that's pretty much how I see it. Rugby has been around for a while, but it's never really been lifted way up. Boxing has been in here since forever. It has history over history over history behind it. UFC, I really don't know much about UFC. I don't know the history of UFC. All I know is UFC. I'm guessing it has 115 months or whatever, since all the pay-per-view UFCs have a number, and those pay-per-views are usually after a month. Each pay-per-view is usually after a month. So that's all I know. And I really hate to see two guys on top of each other. I mean, trying to choke each other or whatever it is. The only UFC fighter that I truly like his style of fighting is Anderson Silva, because this man, he does not go onto the ground and try to hug you and hump you like all these other dudes do. He's just gonna stand his ground, and he's gonna watch you and let you get up so they can fight again. That's the only UFC fighter that I truly like. All the other UFC fighters, I don't like that they get on the floor and go around just hugging each other. It's not, I don't see it as very disciplined. It's very, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You just can't bite, I guess. That's the only rule, or kick in the nuts. But in boxing, it's much more disciplined. Only hands, making it much tougher. Bringing up the competitiveness, because it only is hands. And if you're a good mental fighter, you will win. In UFC, if you are stronger and you just gotta get in a lucky punch, you will win. In boxing, if you're a good defensive fighter, there won't be any lucky punches. There just won't be any lucky punches. So that's my take. Comment whatever y'all think about UFC and boxing. Peace. TheBoxingj.